Hey everyone, I'm Al, and as Adam said, I'm the Literary Associate at Box of Tricks, and welcome to my workshop on writing pantomime. We'll also touch on collaborative working as well, just drawing on my experience of working on pantomimes with other creatives, such as directors and choreographers, costume designers, fight directors. There's a little bit of everything in there, and hopefully the aim of this workshop is to give an overview of the structure and traditions of pantomime and explore the tools that you might need to write your first, or in fact your 101st panto script, whether you're new to it or whether you're an old hand like me. I love panto. I think that goes without saying. Clearly I'm also obsessed with Christmas because I'm wearing the Christmas jumper and it's got light up things on it. Thank you, Alison, for your message there saying that you loved it. I always love getting in the season for Christmas early. Sadly, this year I'm not writing a panto because, you know, Christmas is cancelled. So normally I would be wearing this in March just to get me in the mood, but I'm a little bit late this year. Anyway, just a little bit about me then. As I said, I'm Box of Tricks' Literary Associate. I've been with the company for about a year. I'm also a professional pantomime writer. My background, I studied drama at uni in Hull, and then did a master's in scriptwriting at De Montfort about, oh God, nearly 20 years ago now. Alongside that, I spent most of my career working in theatre marketing for a long time, and writing, sort of, you know, taking second place to that. First play I wrote was longlisted for the Theatre503 Award, which was great. Didn't go anywhere or do anything for me as a writer, but it was one of those really nice things that you can put on your CV. And I did a few trials for Emmerdale, EastEnders and Hollyoaks, until unfortunately my career got in the way, and I moved to Manchester 2 years ago. Took a step back from full-time work to work part-time with Adam and Hannah, and try and focus on my writing as well. So before I go into talking about how I got into writing panto, just want to ask a question. Does anyone have a recent or a first memory of a panto that they want to share? I'll put that out to the group. Anyone going to be really brave? Alison, go on.
I remember going to panto as a child, and I was always really scared of the first like crack when the villain would come out.
Yeah. And
I remember it going pitch black and then this, you know, explosion, and absolutely like in floods of tears because I was so frightened. So that was a good start.
Yeah, I think that's quite common, is getting scared by the baddie. Anyone else got a memory that they want to share about panto? Oh, getting hit. Judith is saying getting hit with cotton wool.
Got Shasta as well.
I remember, I think one of mine was just a local Amdram group, but the big one that I went to see, I think it had Ken Dodd in it, and I just remember being absolutely mesmerised by the dame and the fact that they had a girl playing the prince or the lead male, and I just thought, I want to do that, because I was quite a tomboy, and I thought, I can do that. I can put stockings on and and be Robin Hood, or whoever it might be, Aladdin. And I just fascinated from a very young age, and I've written pantos, starred in pantos, done everything, background, front of stage, everything. So I just love panto.
Amazing.
In my blood.
Yeah, I mean, it's those first memories often that set you up for theatre going for the rest of your life. I remember seeing Rula Lenska and Ian Lavender in, I think it must have been Robin Hood. I was probably 5. It was in the early 80s, showing the age there. Leeds City Varieties, I think. And, I just remember having just the best time ever in a theatre. And, that sort of set me up on my career path, really, of wanting to work in the industry. I worked for many years at Cambridge Arts Theatre in marketing roles, and latterly as commercial director. So I've spent my whole career observing firsthand what audiences want from pantomime, and what makes them tick, what they hate, what they complain about, why they come back, from the audience side. And it's really influenced my approaches to writing. how I got into writing for pantomime was they were looking for a writer in 2014, and I joked, oh well, I'll do it, you know, I've written stuff before, not thinking for a second that they would take me seriously, and the producer said okay, and I've been writing it ever since, and so I've done 6 for them. It was a complete baptism of fire. You know, my first panto was seen by like 35,000 people over Christmas, over 6 weeks, which is a lot of pressure to entertain, and you know, for a novice scriptwriter, it's absolutely terrifying, but also absolutely glorious. And I've worked with some really amazing people, you know, West End directors. I've worked with a choreographer that's choreographed for Kylie. He couldn't get Kylie for panto because I think his contacts are a little bit out of date. You know, an Olivier award-winning lighting designer, and I've written for Wayne Sleep, Curly from Corrie, you know, loads of really exciting people. And what unites us all, and you know, like what Shasta said, I'm not, is that your name? It's your screen name, so I'll just say Shasta. You know, we all have that passion for panto. You know, we love everything about it. And we want to make people laugh. We want to make them cry. We want them dancing in the aisles and, you know, singing "Is This the Way to Amarillo" on the way home, and obviously booking for next year. So that's you know, why we all do it and what unites us all. So let's talk a bit about panto then. You know, what is it and what makes it so popular? Panto, I think, and this is obviously just my opinion, but panto is anything that you want it to be. It can be traditional, it can be contemporary, it can be subversive, it can be anarchic, it can be all of the above or none of the above. It's you know, it's a complete magpie of an art form. It steals the best and the brightest from everything from burlesque to mime, and it just mashes it all together, rolls it in glitter, and you know, puts it to song and dance, which, you know, is just, it's sheer entertainment. It's chameleonic in that no 2 pantomimes are ever the same, even if they're written by the same writer. You know, I've written 2 Cinderellas and 2 Aladdins, both of which couldn't have been more different, and we'll talk about why that is a little bit later on. You know, it's the opportunity to poke fun at anyone you can think of, whether it's your local town councillors or Greta Thunberg, you know, and it doesn't have to be mean. It can be celebratory in its humour, but it's, you know, satire hiding in plain sight, and it's introducing kids, you know, to these concepts at a very young age. And it's very collaborative. You know, when you think about traditional playwriting, you know, you have the writer has spent all this time creating this perfect script, and if you're lucky, you'll have a creative team that really honour everything that you put on the page. I think with pantomime, you can't afford to have that approach. You have to be much more collaborative. And the writer can't be king, and that's half the fun of it, is that you have to put your work out there and trust that these people will take it and make it the best show that it could possibly be. And above all, it's entertainment. You know, it's entertainment for everyone. It doesn't have to be and shouldn't be end of the pier entertainment, unless, you know, the caveat that if you're literally performing at theatre at the end of a pier. But, you know, you look at the Palladium pantos, you know, the money that goes into that, you know, and or the ticket prices, you know, that is, you know, that is high-end entertainment. And I think whether your panto is being performed in a village hall, you know, or a large-scale theatre, it can absolutely be elevated to something that's worthy of taking up that place in the schedule, because, you know, a lot of theatres will programme 6 to 8 weeks of pantomime a year. 25% of their income could come for it. And, you know, I think as writers and as creators, we all have a commitment to that, of making it the best it could possibly be. So when it comes to writing panto, you know, you should first and foremost think about the sort of panto you want to write. The pantos that I write, because of the theatre that I write for, you know, Cambridge Arts Theatre, it's 700 odd seats in Cambridge. You know, it has a very long-standing traditional pantomime tradition going back to the 30s of, you know, high-end entertainment. It's quite safe, I would say. You know, bit of celebrity casting, you know, decent money in terms of sets and costumes. It's big, it's bright, it's happy. It's very much rooted at the family audience and the schools market and kids. But, you know, if you want to write a you know, feminist retelling of Dick Whittington that puts the women's story centre stage, go for it. You know, if you want to write a really anarchic, subversive adult panto, you know, like the ones above the Stag, I think there's a couple in Manchester as well, you know, you should absolutely write the panto that you want to write. But in order to break those rules, if that's what you want to do, I think it's important to know the rules. So we're just going to, you know, rattle through some of the rules and traditions of panto, which will hopefully then give you all the bedrock of you know, starting to be able to create those stories. And if you want to rip up that rule book, please do so by all means.
Before we launch into that, Al,
yeah,
Julie was asking, have you always written on your own, or is it a co-writing?
Okay, yeah, so I saw that come into the chat actually after you talked about cotton wool covered spangles. I mean, basically, like, cotton wool covered spangles is what I believe my pantos are, so like, put that perfectly. I've done both, Julie. I've co-written with our resident dame Matt Crosby, who I've known for, you know, 15 odd years, and he started out as the comic in Cambridge when I first started there, and he's grown into being the dame. And I've also written the last 4 on my own. They are you know, they're very different ways of approaching it actually, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. I don't favour either actually. I love writing with someone, because, you know, getting in a room usually in sort of like mid-August with 3 bottles of wine and often a litre of Baileys as well actually, and, you know, getting that first draft out of the 2 of you is a wonderful boozy experience. It's very painful, but also screamingly funny. But similarly, I quite like the rigour of sitting down on my own and actually, you know, the planning it in a little bit more of a structured way. So I hope that answers that question. So onwards then. Just a little typical timeline for production. Like I said, you know, this is all based on my experience of writing panto. So it's by no means, you know, the Bible in terms of how things work. But, you know, usually I'm given a title in Cambridge. It's very much driven by the producer going, this year we are doing Cinderella. So in early spring, I start thinking about my story outline and also character notes, so they can go for casting. We use a casting director. So, you know, often they need to know everything about your characters before you've even written a word. So, you know, that's quite fun. Get a first draft out in April, audition over the summer, and then rewrite, you know, 5 to 8 different iterations of it between the summer and September. In September, we usually have our music meetings so that the MD can start doing their arrangements. Then you get a rehearsal draft in October, ready for rehearsals in mid-November, really. So actually now, this time of year in October would normally be when I'd be working on that final rehearsal draft and bringing it all together after. So it's probably like a 6-month process. And then, you know, going into production first week in December, usually with a press night around anywhere like the 5th or something, and then a massive sigh of relief. It's not like writing a standard play, you know. I don't sit in my room and carefully construct the perfect panto in 1 or 2 sittings. Alison, I've just seen your question about songs. We're coming up to songs later. Absolutely leaving gaps about, yes, leave song here. I'll go into that in much more detail. So, you know, the writer doesn't sit. Adam said yesterday, you know, about sitting in your ivory tower, or as I like to think of it, my damp bed sit, you know, writing my play and then handing it over. Panto is like a living, breathing thing. It's constantly changing. And crucially as well, it's a new show every year. You know, we write our pantos from scratch. in Cambridge, you know, to the point that we can. Obviously, it's not completely new because we do classic titles, but it weaves together this shared vision that starts with the writer, but then the director, the choreographer, and the costume designer, they all come on board, and the writer's role is pivotal in that. And so, you know, if you're lucky enough to have that sort of collaborative experience, it's really brilliant to learn from other people and influence other people in this shared sort of working environment. But you are pivotal to that as writer. You know, you have to absorb everyone else's feedback and sort of bring it all together and churn it out. I will say the one thing, just before anyone asks in the chat, to preempt it, I've never worked with a set designer when it comes to panto, and I'll talk about why in a bit. I would love to. I think it would be absolutely amazing to do it from scratch that way, but that's just not the way we do it. So you want to write a panto, so where do you start? These are the steps that I follow, and they work for me, and they work for the theatre that I write for. But you know, obviously you do you. Don't take this as gospel, but you know, I can only talk from my own experience. The first step seems a little stupid and basic, but you need to know your title, because otherwise, I mean, you know, quite how you write it. It's funny, isn't it? Because actually, playwrights, often the title comes last. You've got your working title, and then you write play, and you go, "Oh God, you know, I can't say that. You can't have the title of the show," and then reference it in the script, and you call it something else, and then you call it something else, and you know, by the time you actually ever get that show on, you've actually forgotten what you called it originally. It's completely back to front for panto. You know, with me, the producer will go, "Right, we are doing Cinderella." So you go, "Hooray! I've got Cinderella." Okay. I mean, there are plenty of panto titles to choose from. There's 4 big hitters that are absolutely, from an artistic and a financial perspective, the most popular. It's no coincidence probably that those are the 4 that I've written, because they're surefire bets. Top of the list is Cinderella, classic rag to riches story, loads of opportunity for spectacle. And then not quite as popular, but still at the top, you've got Aladdin. You know, the difference there is Aladdin's got lots of adventure. Cinderella's far more about, you know, love stories and personal, you know, journeys, whereas Aladdin is like a proper adventure. Similarly, Jack and the Beanstalk is probably the 3rd most popular title. Again, great adventure story. And then 4th on the list, I would say Dick Whittington. Dick Whittington's a bit plot light. You know, when you sit down and think about it, not much happens, but it's timeless, and also it's an English story, so I think that probably explains its popularity. And then you've got like everything else: Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Robin Hood, Peter Pan. Well, that's not really a panto, but you know, Goldilocks, Robinson Crusoe. Really, you can probably turn any story into pantomime, as long as you think about the character types and a broad story structure. So, you know, you probably could do Tier 3 Lockdown the Panto, as long as your character types were true to other pantomimes. The great thing about knowing your title first is that it gives you, to a certain extent, your characters, so you know the sort of the pieces you're working with, and they all fit broadly into character types. I'm going to throw this out to the room so I can take a drink of water. Can anyone name me some character types that they might see in the panto? I don't want the specific characters, but more the types. Go on, anyone shout up.
The Dame.
Got the Dame.
The villain.
Principal boy, the villain. Yeah, Terry in the chat says the lover. Yeah, absolutely.
Ugly sisters.
Fairy godmother.
Yeah, fairy godmother would be a character, not a character type, but absolutely, yeah. Ugly sisters, yeah.
Got the baddie from Julie as well. Julie saying the baddie.
Yeah, baddie in the chat. Not Julie's not a baddie in the chat. She's talking about a baddie in the chat, yeah. Anything else?
Comedy duo?
Yeah, often a comedy duo. You know, like Bodger and Scarpet, that sort of thing. You know, that's often a budget constraint.
Sidekick.
Yeah, the sidekick. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, these are all very rooted in history in terms of the character type. So just to recap what you've all got, you've obviously got your heroine, or your hero. You know, that's your principal boy or your principal girl, depending on, you know, how you're casting it. So your Aladdins, your Jack Trots, your Dick Whittington. You've got your mother figure, which is the dame. You know, they sort of represent family. They are often, obviously, a comic part, but, you know, they can be played with an enormous amount of pathos. Our dame, Matt Crosby, is absolutely wonderful. He can make you cry at the drop of a hat, but he can also make you, you know, sob with laughter. And so that's your Widow Twankey, Sarah the Cook, Dame Trot sort of thing. You've got your comic. So Buttons, who's also sort of a dame, because there is no dame in Cinderella, in my opinion. It's Buttons, but also Idle Jack, Silly Billy, Wishy Washy, you know, that's your comic relief. You've got your villain, obviously, your Abanazas, your ugly sisters, or evil stepmums, Flesh Creep, King Rat. Your love interest, Prince Charming, Princess Jasmine, because I can't say Jasmine because of Disney, Alice Fitzwarren and Dick Whittington. The one thing that no one said, actually, interestingly, you've got your father figure. Often the love interest to the dame, often the straight man to the comic. So Baron Hardarp, Alderman Fitzwarren, King Bumble, he's often called in Jack and the Beanstalk. And then, of course, you've got your immortal character, which is your fairy godmothers, your genie of the lamp, and your fairy Bowbells. There's also, to a lesser extent, because they don't appear in all pantos, but you've got like your costume character. So that would be Tommy the Cat in Dick Whittington. The thing is, you know, all of these character types are rooted in tradition and history, and regardless of who they actually are, you know, what their names are, they give your story the drama and they give you the conflict. You know, they set up your lovers, they set up your good versus evil, your morals and your comedy. So it all comes from those characters. A little bit of history, you know, they grew out of the Commedia dell'arte tradition, which gave us stock characters that did certain things that were true to their nature, and they've influenced a lot about modern panto. So if you think about like the character of Columbine in Commedia dell'arte, she's the headstrong servant, love interest, running rings around her idiot father, Pantalone. Well, you can see the direct link with that to something like, you know, the princess in Aladdin and her relationship with the emperor, who is her dad. Or it doesn't have to be, but, you know, is that father figure. So I always find it really helpful to define the characteristics of my leading characters, you know, little 3-line bio or something like that for each of them, looking at, you know, what's their moral center, what drives them. And it helps to define it because then you can stick to it in the script so that they act within character. It just gives you that sort of point of focus, so that when you're constructing it, you can go, well, what would Dick Whittington do in this situation? So, you know, the princess in Aladdin, you know, in a version that I did, she's headstrong, she's dignified, she sees her lifestyle as privileged, but it's a burden, not birthright. And the traditions of the royal family are just a constant source of annoyance, and she's always trying to challenge the status quo. So that then means in the story, when Aladdin catches her eye, she pursues him, not just because he's the bland love interest, but because she wants to challenge the status quo, rather than, you know, just he's a handsome hero. And then when he becomes Prince in Act 2, she's then less interested, so he has to work harder to, you know, pursue her. It just gives your characters a bit more dimension, really, than just being like, you know, he is the love interest, she is the comic. And, you know, that's just one example, and you can have real fun subverting those character types, actually, and sort of seeing how they would react in different situations, if you constructed them against stereotype. So every title, that again gives you a basic story. You know, it has its beginning, its middle, its end. You know, Jack Trot climbs a beanstalk and kills a giant. You know, Dick Whittington becomes Lord Mayor of London. The best way to find out those stories, if you don't know them, is research. You know, read books, have a look. There's itsbehindyu.com. I can send out these links afterwards for anyone who's interested. Has loads of lovely historical story outlines for all of the major pantos, with some really surprising variants as well. You know, I had no idea before I'd ever seen Dick Whittington that Dick Whittington ended up in Morocco. Of course he does, you know, he's on a ship, he sails off, goes to Morocco. But I've also then seen versions where they end up at the bottom of the sea in King Neptune's court, or it's a mermaid. And, you know, I've also seen that in Peter Pan. So there's so many variations within each panto, and researching that history gives you all the scope to play around with the story. And knowing what's been done before can then free your mind to the possibility of what the story you want to write. What some of them, like Dick Whittington, are actually, as I said before, they're quite plot light, so there's plenty of scope for invention and originality. Others, Cinderella, the obvious example, there is so much plot that actually it's quite hard to deviate from that, because you just have to keep rushing through, you know. Oh, then she, fairy godmother goes to the ball, meets prince, something to do with glass slipper, the end. And actually you go, well, okay, I've only got, you know, 75 minutes plus songs, you know, there's not much room for invention. But, you know, at this point in the writing, you can afford to have a think about the story, the basic story and your story beats, and how you're going to play around with them, and where, you know, you're going to have that narrative invention that will make it your panto. So let's have a little play around with this briefly. Classic Cinderella setup. Cinderella meets Prince Charming in the forest, traditionally. You know you want those two characters to meet, and you know that you want the prince to go away in love and Cinderella to go away wanting to marry the prince. Who wants to be brave enough to suggest why they are there in that forest? Other than the convenience of, you know, they need to meet in the forest. Go on, Shazda.
Is Cinderella collecting food, like sort of, what do you call it? Foraging for food.
Yeah, that's the kind of traditional setup. She's, you know, she's collecting firewood, she's looking for food, something like that. So who wants to throw in an alternative to that? Let's throw the firewood out the window. Why else might they be in that forest?
I'm kind of wary to make a suggestion here in case I'm completely wrong. But
no such thing.
Like the kind of Shakespearean idea of a forest, is it like idea of kind of sexual awakening and
I love it.
Dark revelation.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, that's classic panto, really, isn't it? You know, nicking from Shakespeare, making it palatable for children, but also a little bit subversive, so that the adults go, oh, I know that, and it makes them feel clever. That they enjoy it because they feel clever, yeah. But you know, maybe you don't want them to be foraging for firewood, you know, because that's being done to death. What else could they be doing? Kitty, go on.
You could have seen a meteorite fall in the forest, and she's like, "Oh, I'm interested." Something.
Love it, yeah, a bit like Stardust. Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think the point I'm trying to make here is, like, even with a story as traditional and you know, well trodden as Cinderella, there is still endless room for invention and around those set pieces. You know what you want to achieve with those scenes, but you can really afford to be original. I mean, you know, meteorite falling in the forest are brilliant. I think I've ever seen that in a panto, and actually a lot of people would get that reference, you know, that Stardust reference, or, you know, or not, if that's not what was intended. So, you know, for example, we've done it before. They meet in the hunt, you know, the royal hunt. Cinderella saves a fox. Prince Charming, you know, sees the error of his ways and, you know, wants to save the animals. We've done it, I've seen it done with a winter fair. That was amazing, you know. Another chance for a big song and dance number. Last year, we and a couple of other theatres actually had Cinderella and Buttons on an Extinction Rebellion march. So our setup was Prince was a property developer who just returned from overseas. We knew morally in the story he needed to be taught the error of his ways. And that was the vehicle that allowed it to do it. You know, really fun, interesting contemporary twist on a tale which, you know, really, on the face of it, there isn't much room for invention. So, you know, have a think about those set pieces and how you move from, you know, beat to beat in your story, and find really fun and interesting ways to do it. You could, yes, Adam.
Yeah, just on that, do you like, because obviously, like, with in terms of writing a play and approaching that and it being your idea that you're exploring, and then having certain kind of parameters within which the story is already kind of established and you're having to kind of work within those, Do you find those parameters freeing or limiting, I guess?
I think both. I mean, I'm going to talk about set now. I work in a very restricted way, in that I have to write a pantomime based on the set that has been hired by the theatre. So that in and of itself is very limiting, you know, because there is a progression of scenes within that. But I think once you know that and accept it and allow your imagination to run free, you know, the world's your oyster, really. Because to a certain extent, you know, with panto, you have, you know, a panto front cloth that shows a village road. You could write any scene on that. It doesn't actually matter that it's the road into the village, because you don't know where the village is or what's happening there. So, yeah, but both, I think, is the answer. And similarly, I can see how if you work with a set design from scratch, actually, you have to be so defined and prescriptive in terms of what you want that set to be and how it interacts with the story, that actually that in itself could possibly be quite limiting, because you're having to put a cap on your imagination. So yeah, the sets that we work with in Cambridge, they're hired sets. They follow a set pattern. Oh, sorry, terrible joke there. As I said before, I don't have the experience of writing a panto with a set from scratch, but you know, these hired sets that take the story, it's absolutely vital to know that set inside out, know what the logistics are, you know, what's a full stage scene, what's a half stage, what's a front cloth, and then crucially where they will sit behind each other on the theatre, you know. So that's where that first touchstone of collaboration comes in. It's not often with the director, it's usually like a technical manager or a production manager who goes, all right, in Dick Whittington, you know, the dock scene has to split apart for the ship to come through, but that has to all sit behind that front cloth, you know, which is King Rat's lair. And then you need to mash those story beats that you've looked at onto that set and do it early, so that basically you don't write yourself into a massive hole, which I have done before. Sometimes you just get it wrong, or the set doesn't work in the way you think it does, or your story doesn't work. Often you just need to write extra scenes because there's a massive scene change and it's loud, and you need to write a cover. And that's why often in pantos you get those scenes on the front cloth where someone just comes on and it's all a bit nonsensical and silly, because you know that behind them it's all chaos backstage. I mean, I quite like that. It's quite, you know, it's quite funny it's the one bit in panto where you don't need to just keep things moving. You actually have to take a step back and just entertain people for the sake of it. So at this point early on, I always do, you know, maybe a 3 to 5 page, bit like a treatment, but it's basically, you know, expanding those story beats into something that's well structured and shows anyone who needs to see it at this point how your story progresses and how the characters within it interacts with each other. It's the who, you know, who's doing what, where and why, basically, and it irons out all of those plot holes and allows you to question your characters' motives, check that they're being true to character. So remember, if we've done our work, we've got our little character bios that tell us, you know, if Prince Charming is at the ball, he's going to want to talk to all the men first because he's scared of women, for example. So you know, you can write it around that. It might not seem the most sexy way to write a script, but remember, you're not writing, you know, your magnum opus. You're writing a crazy collaborative musical dance extravaganza that's covered in glitter. So the rule book does go out the window. It has to. And this worked for me, you know, this methodological, well, I might have made up a word there. Methodical, that's the one. Can we edit that bit out? Okay, I'll pause. Methodical way of doing it. You know, it works for me. It might not work for you. You might want to start, you know, dive straight in with a scene. Like I said, you know, you do you and I'll do me, and you know, no right way is the right way. There is no right way. So the good thing about structure is it leads, you know, to effective storytelling. That is one good thing about it. So I just wanted to give a few hints and tips and tricks on story structure, particularly for panto. I really recommend that you read. I've got a little bibliography which I'll share with you at the end. One of the books on it is The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. Have any heard of that? It's like the seminal work on the hero and the hero's journey in myth and fairy tale. It's probably it's probably nearly 100 years old now. I'm not actually sure when it was written, so it's a bit kind of stodgy in early 20th century. But you'll find that most pantos, in fact, probably all pantos, somehow fit within this framework of the hero's journey. You wouldn't want to write it in that way, but it's really interesting to compare the two side by side. And it's no coincidence, actually, that book directly influenced the writing of films like Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, you know, the list goes on and on and on. So there's certain things that we can take from this book. You've got a prologue, and that sets up your, it introduces the forces of good and evil in your story. So you have your good immortal, that's your fairy godmother, fairy Bowbells, sometimes the genie of the lamp. You know, they set up the force of good, and that's then contradicted by the force of evil, King Rat, Abanazar, something like that. You know, not all pantos will have that prologue, but often they will. It's a good way to quiet people down and then scare them, like Alison was scared with lots of, you know, noise and lights and things like that, you know, as kids. It also outlines the obstacles that will be put in your heroine or your hero's path. So, you know, Dick Whittington comes to London to seek his fortune. Fairy Bowbells wants to see him crowned the Lord Mayor. King Rat wants power for himself. So, you know, you could probably do that in a page. And, you know, it's just sets the moral heart of your story up, really, and sets your hero off on their journey. Your opening scene, I mean, I don't think you could not get away with doing this. It has to be a big song and dance number. It's got to get everyone on stage. It's got to be bright and fun. Introduce your audience to the world that your hero is going to take their journey and embark on. You know, so big London street scene in Dick Whittington, Peking Market in Aladdin. Jack and the Beanstalk's great because it's not really set anywhere, so you could have that opening scene, you know, wherever you want, depending on the set, but it's usually like a village fair type scene. It introduces your heroine or your hero, and crucially it lets them discover the object of their desire, you know, the love interest, their dreams of a better life. If it's Cinderella, you know, it sets up that object, and then slap bang in their path comes the obstacle to their happiness. So, you know, she meets Prince Charming, he's a man of her dreams, but he's a prince and she's a commoner. And then that's, you know, an intangible obstacle, but then she's obviously got her ugly stepsister's physical obstacle as well. So you can play around with, you know, the physical and I guess like the metaphysical, getting a bit deep there. And then all you need to do is just rattle through the plot with as many songs and dances and jokes in as you can possibly do, really. There's not a lot else with structure in as far as it goes. But you should always, referring back to the hero of 1,000 Faces, you know, consider what your hero's call to adventure is. You know, something like Jack and the Beanstalk is very obvious. It's that giant up in the sky. You know, he knows he wants to go up there because of his thirst for adventure. Often your hero needs a mentor. That is often the immortal character. You know, your fairy godmother mentors Cinderella in a very convenient and magic-induced way, but nevertheless still mentors. And then there's the concept of, Joseph Campbell calls it the road of trials, and that's how they're tested on their journey. You can have real fun, you know, playing with all of this and applying it to your story. But just as you go through, just remember pace is everything. You know, keep everything whizzing along at top speed, injections of energy into your plot, whether it's short scenes or, you know, fun things or song and dance. You basically don't want the kids to get bored. That's like the, you know, the golden rule of panto is if a kid is bored, they will tell you repeatedly, and you don't want that happening. Your Act 1 closer should be a real climactic moment. Now, you know, if you're working with a producer or a theatre that has a big budget and you can afford, you know, flying horses or beanstalks going up into the sky, great. But if you don't have the budget, you know, you can still finish on a high. You can do an amazing, you know, song and dance, really theatrically effective. But it has, you know, you have to send people out in the interval going, oh my God, that was amazing. But also crucially from a story perspective, it's not been resolved yet. So I want to know what's going to happen when I go back in. you know, that's like, you know, any high end, you know, high entertainment, high octane kind of panto sends the kids out brimming with excitement, so that they have to eat a lot of sugar to keep that excitement going into Act 2. You know, and you should probably have those discussions early, or they could be discussions with yourself, you know, clearly if you're a writer director, but you know, how are you going to achieve that high moment? Structurally speaking, the second half is where things should get difficult for your heroine or your hero. Cinderella loses her shoe, is, you know, doomed to return to normal life. Jack's climbed the beanstalk in Act 1, but he's facing a terrifying giant and he's scared. They're facing peril, the baddies are closing in, and building the tension. You know, you want the audience to be rooting for the good guys because it looks like they may not make it. And then when all seems lost, there's that lovely moment, you know, Prince Charming's going to have to marry an ugly sister because everyone's conveniently forgotten that Cinderella's locked in a cupboard, and there's no more single women. You know, you get your Deus Ex Machina, you get your fairy godmother waving her convenient magical wand to intervene. Good is allowed to triumph over evil, and then everyone goes to a royal wedding. You know, the ending, that big royal wedding, that is, you know, well and truly nicked from the Harlequinade, which is what Commedia dell'arte grew into in the 19th century. It's the spectacle, it's what people want to see, and it's also just a really good chance for a knees up and a mega mix of all the songs in the show, and your bows and all of that sort of stuff. So that's a few notes on structure. Obviously then you need action and dialogue, but you also need your songs, you need some routines, you also need some physical comedy, which, you know, at this stage you might not know a lot of those things, which seems like a strange thing to say, but, you know, bear with me. Physical comedy and slapstick is very hard to write. You know, try and write He Falls Downstairs and make it funny and make an actor laugh. It's, you know, it's impossible. You know, you can write vividly, but, you know, physical comedy on the page is very dry. It relies on the actors, it relies on the director, it relies on that spirit of collaboration, realizing your vision. You know, and those, you know, those slapstick moments, you know, it's grown out of burlesque, it's grown out of music hall, it's what makes the British panto tradition. Often utilising talent who have their own stock routines, and you have to let that talent, you know, do its thing. I worked with a ventriloquist, and this is a terrible joke, but it's also true. And I'm just going to read it off the page. I worked with a ventriloquist, and not to put words in his mouth, but what I wrote was terrible. It's true. It was awful because I'm not a ventriloquist. And so I wrote what I thought was really funny stuff with him and his little monkey, and everyone just looked at him and was like, it's just not going to work, you know. So respecting that tradition, that the artist can bring something to the table and making it collaborative, I think is really important. And there are a lot of panto traditions as well. So I'm going to open it up to the room again. Can anyone name some panto traditions?
Chucking sweets.
No, you can't chuck sweets because of health and safety. We banned that in 2008, but yes. Yes, it's behind you. Thanks, Kitty. Much like my career in COVID.
A chase through the audience?
Yes, yeah, love that. You know, that's often the comics, actually, you know, or someone chasing the baddie, or a fox in Cinderella, yeah.
A messy kitchen scene, like a scene set in like a kitchen where they're chucking stuff at
Oh, I love a slosh scene. I'll talk about that later individually, but yeah, you got a slosh scene.
The ghost, when the ghost like picks them off.
Yeah, ghost gag. Yeah, I mean, you know, this stuff is old as the hills, but you know, don't put it in a panto and you will get complaints. All of the complaints I've had about pantomime are either it's disgusting that you have women playing men, or, you know, your panto's not traditional enough. You know, where are the behind you moments? But, you know, you've also got, you know, older things. So the things like baddies entering stage left, goodies stage right. So, you know, that's where the word left from sinistre in the French, meaning sinister. Ooh, you know, knowledge. I nicked that from a book, actually. So, The fact that the immortals often talk in rhyming couplets, you know, lines that are absolutely as old as the hills, you know, 10 miles from London and still no sign of Dick, you know, oh me, oh my, I'm the only one saved from the wreck, you know, the audiences actually expect all of this stuff. Song sheets, you know, references to Christmas, that's why I'm wearing my Christmas jumper, call and response, you know, shout outs, happy birthday. You should absolutely write the panto that you want to write and not get too bogged down in tradition, but just be warned that at some point someone will say that's all great, but you need to put more traditional stuff in, you know, because that's, audiences come to expect it, and it's also fun, you know, and it takes some of the hard work out of it, because, you know, you're being carried by traditions that are, you know, 100 years old, and actually that's really supportive. Anyway, you know, on with the writing, we're getting going with it, we're putting our action and our dialogue in. Another golden rule I always try and work to is, if it doesn't advance the plot and it's not a joke, cut it, don't even bother putting it in, you know. There's no point, kids aren't going to sit through lengthy exposition. If you've got a complicated plot point, you want it to be like, this is going to happen, is it really? Why is that? Well, it's because of this reason. Okay, let's get on with it, you know. Whereas actually, you know, if you're writing a play, you could do that really, like, you know, elegantly and over a series of, you know, montage conversations. No, you just don't get that luxury in writing pantos. You really need to just distill it down to the bare bones and then roll it in jokes and glitter, which is why, you know, I harp on about that story structure. Knowing the bare bones of your story and intricately how it works together will just allow you to just whiz through the whole, you know, like boatload of exposition. And then you've made it to the end of your script. Amazing. It will have so many gaps in it. It will have just bits where you've written, here is some nonsense, insert a routine here, oh, topical joke, I think this might be a song, you know, because that's what a first draft of panto has to be. But crucially, it should show you how you're telling your story and how your characters are overcoming the obstacles that are set in their path. You know, how Jack gets rich, how Cinderella overcomes hardship, how Dick Whittington becomes Lord Mayor of London. My first draft of my first panto was an anarchic mess from a story perspective, as well as just it was about 7 pages long, I'm sure. You know, the baddie got away with it, the princess rejected Aladdin. I thought I was trying to be really contemporary and ironic, but I was just being stupid. I wasn't writing for the theatre and for the audience that I needed to write for. So I rewrote it in a much more sort of traditional way, and suddenly it worked. You know, so again, if you want to go down that anarchic subversive route, that's fine. You need to find a vehicle for that. You know, you need to find the theatre or the production company that's going to put that on. But you'll know that from the outset, because, you know, you've followed this workshop very closely, and the first thing we said was think about the panto that you want to write. And don't be afraid of those gaps in the first instance. You know, insert nonsense here is great, because for an actor, particularly, you know, like an established panto actor, if you work with someone like Wayne Sleep, Clang, you know, name drop there, you know, Wayne's been doing panto for decades. You know, he knows what he's going to do when, you know, he knows that he has to respect how you tell the story. So he'll, if you're lucky, he'll tell the lines as you wrote them, but he'll also bring Wayne Sleep to the show, and, you know, that's what you're paying him for. Same as with the Dame, to go back to the question was asked about collaborative writing. You know, I don't write the Dame's opening monologue because I'm not a panto Dame, and crucially, I'm not the Cambridge panto Dame. You know, I can suggest some jokes or a through line of what his character is, but he will be the one who creates that wonderful opening monologue that, you know, has them eating out of the palm of his hand. Same as, you know, with ventriloquists and all of that sort of stuff. That's kind of the true spirit of collaboration, I think. Someone asked about slosh scenes. We can talk about them. Absolutely love them. Traditional panto, Cambridge included, always has a slosh scene. Usually it's in the second act. It's just an excuse for everyone to do what children want, and that's to fall over and get, you know, custard pies thrown in their face. They're often improvised, which makes them fiendishly difficult to write, and they're improvised because no two performances are alike, because it's very hard to retain lines when you're falling and slipping, sliding all over the place. It's usually the Dame and the comic that do them, but sometimes because the Dame in this instance seriousness is actually usually the straight man, and they're compounded by the comic stupidity. And the audience have to be in on the joke, and the joke has to be usually you can't make any mess for some reason. So like in Cinderella, Cinderella's always a bit different because it's Cinderella, but it's the ugly sisters and Buttons. Usually they're getting ready to go to the ball, or they're having a spa day after the ball, depending on whether you want a 5-hour first act or not. And Buttons has to help them, but he's got to be very careful not to get any mess on their hair, you know, something like that. Or in Aladdin, Widow Twankey's got a new laundromat because Aladdin's rich because of the cave, all that stuff. Only Wishy Washy's not been given the instructions, and it'd be really bad for business if all the clothes got shrunk in the wash. You know, so the audience are in on it from the get-go. It's that dramatic irony, but it's dramatic irony for 5-year-olds, which is brilliant because you just go, this is the joke right at the beginning of the scene, and then just let them laugh their heads off. Absolutely love it. My favourite one is in Dick Whittington. We do like a rocking deck, and they do like Sarah the cook is road testing a new menu for Alderman Fitzwarrow, and basically like it's just spaghetti and meatballs flying all over the place, and it is hilarious. And also like you know the actors are laughing all the way to A&E. So again, it's a really good opportunity to work really collaboratively with your actors. You know, find out what they can do. You know, can they tumble? Do they do gymnastics? You know, are they happy to get like literal, you know, slosh thrown in their face and, you know, risk breaking their necks for 65 performances over the Christmas period? There's no point in giving them reams of text because they'll just fall over and forget it anyway. And obviously you don't need megabucks. You know, you can just do it with buckets, you can do it with mops, you know, there's mop routines, you can do it with water pistols, get the audience wet as well, foam bricks, you know, anything. It's just got to be funny, it's got to be slapstick. Just going to talk a bit about redrafting and the reasons why you will need to redraft, because again, it's slightly different from with the usual script. Casting is the first obvious one. You know, normally you'd write a play, you go, here are my characters, let's find someone to fit the part. It's not particularly with professional pantomime, particularly if you are writing for a theatre that does do celebrity casting, or you know, high profile casting. You might write like, you know, the most hilarious you know, I don't know, an overweight fairy with a god complex who you want to be played by a 20-year-old on roller skates, and then they cast Elaine Page, you know, and so you're going to have to go and do an extensive rewrite. But it's a catch-22 because you can't not write that character or do it so blandly that when Elaine's in the audition, I mean, my God, I would love to write for Elaine Page, but you know, that'll be a dream come true. You know, she's there reading these lines going, but I'm not 20, what, you know, screw you guys. So an example of that, actually a real example that's not, you know, when I first wrote Dick Whittington, the character of Tommy the Cat was going to be like a generic kind of upgraded ensemble member, you know, gymnastic, and didn't really speak, just basically said meow to everything. We were probably going to do, you know, a member of the ensemble was going to double up. But the director had a hunch in auditions because a guy came in to audition for the role of the comic. And he was, you know, 20-something, he was quite overweight, he was Glaswegian, and he was completely unsuited to the role of Idle Jack, or Silly Billy, or whatever it was. But he was absolutely hilarious. And Carol, the director, said, just get him to read for the cat. And it'll be funny, it's the end of the day, we don't lose anything for it. And he read it like hyperactive Garfield in a really broad Scottish accent. And we were just like, this is what this has been missing, you know. Meanwhile, I'm there in the room going, oh God, I've got to rewrite the whole thing now. But it was really worth it because the audience came in thinking they were going to see, you know, some lithe and limber, you know, cat jumping around all over the place, and that's not what they got, and it absolutely confounded their expectations, and it was hilarious, and it was cool before James Corden made it cool in Cats as well, I would like to point out. You know, but those sorts of rewrites are inevitable because, you know, the people you get in casting your role are probably not what you originally imagined. They're going to be better or just different, and so you've got to really take that on the chin and just accept that, you know, rewrites will happen. And again, that's half the fun, is working out, you know, how you repurpose that role. I've had to rewrite roles from, you know, prose it completely into rhyming couplets, because late in the day the director sort of went, oh, I think maybe the fairy should talk completely in rhyming couplets throughout the whole production. And you're like, okay, let me just find my trusting, this is from the bibliography, my rhyming dictionary. Oh yes. And you know, you just have to do it. The other thing that will inevitably crop up in rewrites is songs. I think someone asked a question about songs, but at some point in the process, you're going to have to start thinking about song choices. And now I'm coming from the perspective of we don't have originally composed songs. It's all existing songs. I usually put song beats in my script, as in, you know, here is a love song, here is a duet, here is an ensemble number, and then work with the director and the musical director to find out what those songs will be. You know, because I might think I've picked the perfect pop song, and then actually it won't work with the vocal range of the artist, or it got used last year, or you've had 3 pop songs in a row. You know, every opinion on a song is entirely subjective. You know, it might be unchoreographable. It might just be a shit song. It might be Ed Sheeran, in which case you have to use it because people love it. But you know, you want a range that everyone will know. You can't just do pop songs. You can't just do musical theatre. I've just got a sample song list from the first act of Cinderella last year. We opened with a song from that classic piece of 60s something musical theatre, The Smell of the Green Spade and the Roar of the Crowd. No one knows that. I mean, what 5-year-old knows that? So, you know, we had On a Wonderful Day Like Today, Don't Be Anything Less Than Everything You Can Be from Snoopy the Musical, I Like to Move It, you know, from Madagascar, Let's Get Physical, that was Wayne Sleep number, that was eye-opening. Purpose from Avenue Q, Money, Money, Money for Baron Hardup, Rule the World, take that. Count on Me, which is a Jason Mraz song, Bruno Mars, I think, yeah. I Dreamed a Dream from Les Mis, and then we finished on a song called Once Upon a Time from the most obscure musical ever written, which is called Brooklyn, which I've never heard of, but I know that song inside out. But all of those songs drove the narrative, and that's the key, is, you know, pick a song that you can continue to tell the story with, because otherwise if you go story, 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 song, story, 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 you just have to work harder. You know, Money, Money, Money was the moment in Cinderella when Baron Hardup explained in 2.5 minutes why he'd sold Hardup Hall to Prince Charming. So you didn't have to explain it anywhere else, just do it all in song. I mean, the only downside to that is often lyrics can get a bit lost in the noise. So don't do crucial plot points, just, you know, make it a bit interesting. Some songs, Claire, are absolutely ruled out due to copyright. Anything from Grease. For some reason, Greece is the show, not the country. You can have Greek songs, I'm pretty sure. Again, I'm not sure why a bit Nana Muscuri might be a bit odd. The grandparents would love it. Disney is the one. Unfortunately, every Disney song is the perfect panto song because it's driven by narrative and they're beautiful, but you can't use them unless you're Kudos and can afford the rights. If you use Disney and they find out, you will get sued. We got sued one year in Cinderella because we used like 7 Disney songs. Whoops. And then they quickly started clamping down on it. So yeah, so you probably by this point you've got a rehearsal draft or something akin to a rehearsal draft, at which point the script will never ever be as you wrote it, you know, and that's wonderful and it's liberating, but it's also a bit sad, you know, when you do that first read through, if you're lucky to be involved in that, that's the last time you'll ever hear that script as you wrote it. And then you'll go back, you know, to a preview or later in the rehearsals and this show will be there and you're like, well, I think I wrote that show, but none of the jokes are the same and that bit's not quite the same, and I love it. And then you can just roll, you know, sit back and get the credit, which is also great. You know, you can be, if you're lucky, you'll be involved in that rehearsal process. You know, I often kind of touch in every couple of days just to check, usually that there's no narrative issues. You know, they're starting to put the scenes together and they go, like I said before, oh, we need a cover scene because of a scene change, or because, you know, the fairy hasn't quite explained that moral heart of the story well enough. Can you come up with something? You know, but those actors, once they get their grubby little hands on your script, they will chop and change it to their heart's content. And, you know, that's great. They, you know, jokes are subjective as well. I'm going to do some top tips, one of which is about jokes, but, you know, don't assume that what you've written is funny because it's funny to you, because if no one laughs, it's going to get cut anyway. So you have to have this process of letting go. You've let your baby out into the world, and, you know, because of the collaborative nature of it all, you have to trust in those creatives that they know what they're doing. You know, I've worked with a couple of panto directors who have been directing panto for like 40 years. You know, they've worked with everyone from like Les Dawson to Bonnie Langford. And they said Bono then. I was like, I don't remember him doing panto. Les Dawson to Bonnie Langford, you know, all those panto greats, you know, they know their craft inside out. But equally, you might be working with a director who it's their first gig, or you might be the director, in which case you just have to trust in yourself and, you know, your company. It all, I think, goes back to the storytelling. If you're telling a good story and you're telling it well, and you've got believable characters doing things that are true to, you know, the characteristics that you've defined in those planning stages, in a way the jokes and the slapstick and everything and the songs don't matter, because, you know, you've got that emotional through line and narrative, and everything else is, you know, sort of like the layers of the onion. It's the heart, you know, the heart and soul of your panto is what you're writing. Well, that got really deep right at the end, didn't it? I just let's finish off, because I'm quite conscious it's been an hour already. I've got a few just kind of top tips for panto writing, which, you know, as with all of this, it's not gospel. It's just, you know, me trying to wrap it all up, really. And I've probably mentioned some of these, so don't slavishly write them down. Number one, make them laugh, but make all of them laugh. You know, every kind of joke that you can put in, whether they're, you know, big jokes that poke fun at, you know, world events and climate change, you know, little jokes, throwaways, visual gags, long form, you know, jokes that take place over a whole scene, political jokes, visual puns, you know, clever wordplay. There is room for all of those in abundance in panto, and you've got to have everything. I love those jokes that make all the kids laugh, but only the kids, and the parents are all there going, like, I just don't, what's Paw Patrol? I just don't know. But equally, I also like those jokes where like 3 people in the audience laugh, because it's so niche that it just touches a nerve with like 1 or 2 people, and then they laugh, and then everyone laughs at them laughing. You know, you've got to have that spread, and you've got to be a bit like Bob Monkhouse. Do you remember Bob Monkhouse used to have his like joke book? You know, just keep that going all year round. I've got notebooks that are just filled with scribbles of stuff that I've seen on telly, or, you know, I've overheard people on a bus saying silly things, and you just go, I think I could make that into a panto joke. You know, just build up that arsenal, because then you can just throw it all at your script and see what sticks. I said it before right at the beginning, but tell the version of the story that you want to tell. That's the next tip. As long as it's logical within the world that you've constructed, you can afford to be really, really inventive. I think that's a key takeaway. Going back to the humour, I think you can be naughty in panto. My opinion, this is, you know, you can be naughty and maybe a little bit rude, but don't be like Julian Clary at the London Palladium rude. You know, try and tread that fine line between naughty and crude. So like a couple of examples, we had a joke a few years ago, which was a Dame joke. I gave my husband those little blue 007 pills, you know, the ones, they made him Roger Moore. And, you know, everyone laughs, works on many different levels. But then there's like the opposite end to that is a classic ugly sister joke, probably from the 70s. It's like, it goes something along the lines of, you boy, let me into your country club. I'm a country member. Yes, madam, I remember. Yeah, I think that's too much. You know, I think that goes over the line, and I don't want to sound po-faced about it, but you know, you don't necessarily want a load of jokes that have the parents squirming with embarrassment, unless they're jokes about we, because in that case, you know, it's fair game, obviously. Joke's not a joke unless it's trickling down your legs, as Matt Crosby, Panto Dame, always likes to say, like every year, you know. I think the Palladium particularly has come under quite a lot of flack for being just too crude, because you know, when you're charging £100 a ticket with no child discount, you don't want it to be filth. I would say another tip is don't read the reviews. You know, a lot of actors don't read reviews anyway, but not to be like, oh, I don't read my reviews, but more because a lot of reviewers don't get panto, and it's really difficult when someone tries to write like a really ironic review. Hate that. Or as I said before, they might be offended because you've got cross-casting, you know, women playing men or men playing women. Or just, I've had a reviewer once that was grumpy because there were children having a good time behind him. You know, don't go there. You know, trust in your work, trust that the audience are going to enjoy it, and who cares if children are having fun, right? When it comes to joke, another top tip: don't cut it if no one laughs in the rehearsal room, because you know, actors often won't be from, you know, where you are, so they won't get any of the local references. You know, brilliant jokes about like motorways, I don't know, in Panto always work because there's an infamously crap motorway outside Cambridge, the A14, gets a laugh every year. Not in the rehearsal room. Everyone goes, what's the A14? Oh, cut that, it's not funny. No, you know, put it in front of 3 audiences, and it has to be 3 audiences because you want your Saturday night, you know, bevied up Larry audience, you want your Sunday afternoon, you know, grandma's taking the grandchildren to Panto, and your school's matinee audiences. Those 3 audiences are very, very different. School's matinee audiences, dead as a doornail. They don't laugh at anything, but they scream constantly, just like through songs and stuff. So you know, road test it in that way. Don't get freaked if no one laughs immediately. Similarly, if everyone laughs uproariously in the rehearsal room because they're encouraging each other, and then no one laughs, don't be precious, just cut it. You know, I would keep your script current, keep it really current to the point where you don't do anything topical until like 2 weeks before you have to deliver the draft. We had some hilarious jokes about the Scottish referendum in Aladdin, which was written in April 2014, that by November 2014, everyone was just like, was there even a referendum? Who cares? Who cares? No one cares about stuff that happened six months ago. You have to try and be ahead of the curve. You know, Strictly is always funny. Bake Off, kind of just about you can get away with because it's in the run up to Christmas, or if it's something really big like, you know, make a joke about climate change, or Donald Trump, you know. So if you're going to get political, go for the ones that are either local and recent or just so big that they're easy targets, basically. And above all, you know, my final tip, just embrace the silliness. Panto should have heart. It should absolutely have depth. It should absolutely, you know, have an emotional beating heart. But you're not writing Chekhov, you're writing Panto, and you want to entertain people. And the process can be a bit tedious, especially if you do it in this really structured way. So you just want to have fun with it when you actually get down to sitting and writing that first draft, because you know the joy that flows out of your brain down your pen and onto the page will like absolutely shine out from that first draft. If you're sort of writing it going, oh god, you know, I've spent so much time planning this is tedium, that will show, and I have fallen into that trap before. So you just embrace the silliness. It's a mad art form. You know, it just smooshes everything that is great about the world together, and you know, puts it on a stage, rolls it in glitter and shines some lights on it. You know, what can be more entertaining and more fun to write? And that is writing pantomime. I hope you found that useful. Just before I open the floor, thank you, Alison, for your clapped hands there. Just before I open it out to any questions you might have that I haven't already covered, I mentioned a bibliography. I've just got a few books that you might want to look into, which are really useful. I mentioned the Hero with 1,000 Faces. I don't have a copy. I'm sure it's widely available online, but that's that kind of original text on the hero journey. There's a few more. There's one called the Pantomime book by Paul Harris. It's great. It's got lots of old classic routines from like the last 50 to 60 years. He's worked with lots of people like Les Dawson, probably everyone seems to have worked with him, Ronnie Corbett, you know, those sorts of like stalwart panto actors. Creating Pantomime by Joyce Branner and Keith Orton. This really expands in much more detail everything I was talking about story structure and everything. It's really worth reading and goes into great detail about you know, the rehearsal process and working with set designers and stuff like that. I think Joyce is a member of the PlayMakers network, so you know, if you're part of that Facebook group, you know, why not do a post and ask her if you can have a chat if you're interested. Brilliant book called Baggy Pants Comedy. It's a book about 20th century American burlesque comedy, and it's got beautiful, beautiful kind of Laurel and Hardy-esque routines and you know, all Depression era stuff, but they're absolutely wonderful. And you look at them and go, I could absolutely see that on stage with a bit of rewrites. I mentioned the rhyming dictionary. That is absolutely invaluable if you're writing for immortals. And then this is just an example, but you want in your library like every single book ever written that is just like bad puns or cheap gags, you know, those sort of one-line things. I'm not saying steal all your jokes, but be inspired, you know, look at how jokes are constructed. You know, look at what's funny, how you tell a quick joke, have a variety, you know, long form jokes, short form jokes, puns and all of that stuff for kids as well. Like books about jokes for kids are great because they really put you in that mindset. And you know, that's all the toolkit you need really. And I really hope that this has in some way inspired you to go and write a panto that I can come and see with my daughter in the next few years, because you know, I think panto as an art form is thriving, and I think it has so much to give, and I think that we owe it to the art form to keep it going and make it better and modern, keep it contemporary, and also honour all of those traditions that I've talked about. Ta-da!
Amazing, thank you, Al. That was incredible.
Thanks,
Terry's asking if you could send a list of those books, that bibliography.
Yeah, absolutely, Terry. I'll whack an email through Eventbrite and get them all sent out to you, no problem.
Amazing, thank you. And has anyone got any questions now that you'd like to either ask in person or stick into chat? Now is your moment.
Yeah, Alison, I've just seen in chat. I think it's itsbehindyu.com, but I think there might be a hyphen in there.
Yeah, I think it's that one.
Yeah, I'll double check and share it.
Yeah, Kitty.
There's also a website called Lazy Bee Scripts, and like it has loads of pantos on there from like amateur. So if you're just wanting to read pantos, there's loads on there as well.
I mean, this is not the year to recommend it, but I would obviously say the best way to know pantos to go and see them. But there aren't any, so apart from the Palladium and anything else funded by the National Lottery this year.
Good. Boo hiss. Any final questions? Say now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Oh, yeah. Let's go on, Shasta.
I wrote a panto a couple of years ago, which was very topical at the time, but it's also very parochial, as in it's just about the town where I live and the history. And I wrote it quite contemporary, having the female principal girl as the hero, saving a prince-like character. And I also did a big thing about gender in it, so you know, sort of not trying to teach people about it, but I sort of turned all the characters upside down, so I had a furry godfather rather than having basically I tried to turn it on its head, probably too much, but because it was so specific, and it was a summer panto set outdoors because it was going to be set on a barge or have barges and boats involved, because it was about history of the canals in Wigan. The story was not fictitious, it was based on partially on history, but would it be too much just to stick it to being so parochial? Because I didn't want to do it other than doing it on this canal at Wigan Pier. Basically, it was about Wigan Pier and the history of the canals, you know. So
like I said, I think any story can be a pantomime, and you've clearly like tapped into that with, you know, the subversive nature of it. If you're worried about that parochial aspect of it, you know, try stripping all of that out and going, you know, coming at it less from the plot, and I know this sort of contradicts everything I've said, but maybe coming at it from the character and the subversive nature of the characters first, throwing that into an existing story, seeing how that helps. If you need to take that step back from it, that might help.
Because it was quite, it's pirate based as well. So the baddie was the captain of this barge, you know. And then the female characters worked in the pub, you know, on the canal bank and that sort of thing.
I mean, you know, that sort of thing, you know, presumably for an audience local to that area would be, you know, theatrical gold, because it's history and tradition rolled into one. You know, going back to what you were saying about, you know, subverting stereotypes and all that, you know, you do have a great opportunity within that to, you know, teach people or educate people. A lot of panto traditions can feel a bit dated in terms of gender stereotypes, you know, particularly around the female leads. You know, I hate the idea that the princess is a, you know, a passive character who only, you know, is there to be married. You know, for example, I always try and make my female leads, you know, strong feminists who absolutely could not marry Aladdin at the end, you know, like I said in that first draft I did, but actually they do because, you know, they want to, not because they're being told to. So you know, you do have an opportunity to present really positive, you know, aspects to that gender stereotyping that you know, people will take on board and view really positively. I mean, that being said, some people won't like that. You know, you get complaints about things like, you know, Cinderella's dress being not girly enough and all of this. You know, you can't please everyone basically, but you know, you've just got to go into it with good intentions and a good heart, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
Amazing. In that case, I think we're going to wrap it up because and let everyone get on with their afternoon. But thank you so much, Al. That's been so informative. Really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, everyone.
And just a note to all you guys that this is the final masterclass in the season, as I said at the start. But we are hoping to return in the new year with some new activities. So watch this space. And I hope you all have a fantastic afternoon. Cheers. Bye now, everyone.
Bye bye.